Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of Return of the Jedi. Not Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. I'm leaving the episode titles for those awful prequels. That's what I'm doing. I'm leaving it to those. I don't want to associate these classic great films with the prequels in any way, shape, or form. But anyway, Return of the Jedi was this is definitely my favorite Star Wars film growing up. This is the one I watched the most when I was a kid. And it was even I even read an abridged version of the story, but this was one of my favorite books as a kid too. This storybook. I've had this storybook for a long, long, long time. Like my my grandma or my mom or someone they got this for me at a yard sale, and I've had it for ever since. And it's really old. Like it's older than me, and it's starting to fall apart. But they just show you, like, I mean, storybooks back then were really cool, really really cool. But the pages are starting to fall apart a little bit, and yeah, I don't want to show too much from this because it's getting really, because I read it so much that when you read books like this so much, it starts to kind of fall apart. And then also it was used before, so then it was used even heavier later. I mean, even you can see on the side here, there's like damage on the spine, but I'm not ever selling that anyway. It's got so much nostalgic value attached to it that I'm not selling it. No way. Definitely not doing that. But anyway, after watching this again for the first time in a while, I forgot how much fun this film is. It's a very entertaining movie. But I do have some problems with it. And that's why I think it is not as great as the first two, but it's still a good movie. I mean, as a whole, I still think it's see, I would say in some aspects it's great, but in other aspects not so much because it just has some flaws that hold it back just a little bit. That hold it back for me. And I'll get into those soon enough. But anyway, Return of the Jedi is the last film in the original Star Wars trilogy. And by the way, I also watched this in the despecialized edition. So none of the awful fucking overlong musical number with the CGI and none of that shit. I didn't watch the Blu-ray version where Vader at the end when he's conflicted while Luke is getting electrocuted by the Emperor's fingers, and Luke's crying out to his dad to help him, and there's none of this Vader looking at Luke and then going no, and then going no, not none of that. That's just awful. That's a terrible decision by George Lucas. Another terrible decision uh, to add to the list, to the huge list of terrible decisions made by George Lucas. And it's just bad. Bad! No! Please. I mean, once was bad enough in episode 3. We didn't need to add that shit into the Blu-ray. But, yeah, so I did watch in the despecialized edition, which also does not have young Anakin Skywalker. It does not have Hayden Christensen as of the Force Ghost at the end, which is, I don't know what the hell George was thinking when he did that. That makes no sense. You don't have young Anakin. You have young Anakin played by Hayden Christensen as a Force Ghost, but you don't have young Ben Kenobi. You don't have Ewan McGregor. You don't have young Yoda. What the hell? What the fuck is the point? Why? Why, George? These are changes that are completely unnecessary and stupid. And you could see in this film, you could definitely see the warts start to show for the franchise, because in this one, Gary Kurtz was not the producer. It was some other guy who was a really good friend of George's, and I know Gary Kurtz was also friends in some ways, but Gary Kurtz also was was willing to pull George aside and be like, I don't think this is the best idea. Howard Kazanajan, who would go on to produce other films I like Demolition Man later in his career, was not the same type of producer. And so George was given a little bit more free reign. Also, the director, Richard Maraquand, was not really familiar with filming big special effects, epic type films. He just did a war drama. I think it was like a war drama thriller named Eye of the Needle around the time of World War II, I believe. And he just directed that in 1981. That's the last film he directed. And so George did a lot of second unit shooting. So George was on the set a lot for Return of the Jedi. So yeah, and I definitely do believe it was George's idea to have the Ewoks in the film instead of Wookiees. Because originally it was supposed to be Wookiees. Which actually, I mean, it would wipe the bad taste out of my mouth from the Star Wars Holiday Special, and it would redeem the Wookiees in some way, but no. Instead we get the Ewoks, aka a bunch of teddy bears. So they are the teddy bears! The teddy bears! That's what they are. It's like George was thinking, hey, what do kids like? They like teddy bears, don't they? Let's put teddy bears in Star Wars. And he really pushed the Ewoks hard. Like they were this new big thing, and they just stick out like a sore furry thumb. Like, why are they even... I mean, the Wookiees would have made more sense. The Ewoks are just straight up pandering to the children and the audience. Absolute pandering. And a total marketing ploy by George Lucas. I want to get more money from the kids. They'll buy the Ewok stuffed animals. They'll buy the Ewok toys and the Ewok sleeping bags. I'll be rich beyond my wildest dreams because of these Ewoks. And of course, you know, he didn't stop there because he would go in and write a TV movie. You write TV movies. There'd be two TV movies starring Ewoks that were direct sequels to Return of the Jedi. And a cartoon. This is the beginning of George obsessing with merchandising over actual quality or actual reason. And there's other stuff in this film that is obviously catered more to children. A random scene where there's a frog in the desert next to Jabba's palace who eats something and burps. What was the point of that? Oh, for the kids to laugh in the audience. Not really for the adults. I'm just like, what the hell? Why is there a burp joke in this? As a kid, I might have laughed at it. As an adult, I'm like, this seems out of place. How about Chewbacca doing the Tarzan yell in Endor for some reason? Just weird, out of place. Hey, it's for the kids. Hey, Tarzan. Just, no. So there's a lot of that stuff in this movie. But anyway, Return of the Jedi, which was originally called Revenge of the Jedi, because Lucas thought Return of the Jedi was a weak title, but then he decided to change it because Return makes more sense, because Revenge, Luke isn't getting revenge, Luke isn't a Sith, so it makes more sense to call it Return of the Jedi. So anyway, the film is directed by Richard Maraquand, but originally George Lucas wanted David Lynch. But David Lynch turned it down and did Dune instead, which, as much as I like Return of the Jedi and I do enjoy the film, and I would honestly have to say, at the moment, it's the last truly good Star Wars movie, because I thought The Force Awakens was alright. I liked it, but I had a lot more problems with that than I did with Return of the Jedi. And I'll get into that later when I review the movie. But I like Dune so much more than Return of the Jedi. Dune is one of my all-time favorite science fiction films. It's a stunning movie. I think it's very underrated. I love Dune. So, you know, and I like Return of the Jedi, but I love Dune. So I'm glad David Lynch turned down Return of the Jedi and did Dune instead. And George, undeterred, decided to go with another out-of-the-box directing choice and asked David Cronenberg to direct Return of the Jedi. And Cronenberg declined so he could direct Videodrome and The Dead Zone, which I'm glad, because those are two great Cronenberg films. And Cronenberg? David Cronenberg doing Star Wars? I don't know what George was smoking. David Lynch was not a good choice, and neither was David Cronenberg. Lynch, his weird sort of filmmaking worked really well for Dune because Dune's a weird story. Dune is a hell of a lot weirder and stranger than Star Wars is. So that worked. Um, David Cronenberg, no. I mean, what is he gonna do? Put some body horror elements into Star Wars? I mean, I don't know what George was thinking. The screenplay is by Lawrence Kasdan and George Lucas, and there are some. Yeah, I definitely do have some issues with this story. That's one of the some of the problems I do have with the movie, and I'll get into it when I talk about the plot more in depth. I'll talk about them, but yeah, I thought the story had some problems. Um, Nothing really big though, but it had some problems, some dialogue problems, some situations that were not written as well as it could have been, weights of certain characters like Boba Fett, and features music by John Williams, who once again does a great job with the score. I love how in bits of the score with that you see when the Emperor's on screen, you hear a choir in the background, and this is a nice precursor, a nice preview of things to come for his excellent Duel of the Fates score for Episode 1. One of the few things about that movie that's actually any good. And so you also had cinematography by Alan Hume, who sadly is no longer with us. He passed away at the age of 85 a few years ago. May he rest in peace. I think he did a great job with cinematography. It was edited by Sean Barton, Dwayne Dunham, and Marsha Lucas. Dwayne Dunham went on to direct movies himself. He even directed Little Giants, a film I do enjoy. I have fun with that movie. So that was kind of funny. Dwayne Dunham started out his career editing films, and then he went on to become a director, and he helped edit Return of the Jedi. And it all, of course, the same cast returns. I mean, you have Mark Hamill plays Luke Skywalker. Luke has more to do in this because he actually has become a real Jedi, and it's my favorite Luke in the entire series. That's for sure. I mean, Luke has more to do in this. He kicks a lot of ass with his lightsaber, and good duel with Vader. You know, it's a good rematch with Vader and at the end of the film in the climax. Harrison Ford comes back as Han Solo. He was iffy about it. Originally, Harrison wanted Han to die, like a heroic sacrifice halfway through the film, but George fought against that. I mean, even Lawrence Kasdan actually liked Harrison's idea. Harrison was only signed on for 2 films, but he actually he decided to sign on for a third, just because, he actually did like working on the franchise and did like the character. So that's something that is kind of something that's been kind of overlooked. I mean, even I thought that Harrison hated Han Solo, but the more I'm thinking about it, the more I look up some research. That's not the case. Harrison wasn't signed for a third film, and they didn't pay him like an ungodly amount of money to be in Return of the Jedi either. He just decided to do it because of out of respect to George and of respect to the franchise and to the character. And he begrudgingly agreed with George after he just said he put the whole kibosh on killing Han Solo. And I'm actually fine with that. I don't think Han should have died in the first place. I don't think he should have died in any movie, any Star Wars film. So I'm glad he didn't die. I really didn't like that idea. He's gonna get taken out of carbonite just to die. I mean, really, it's very anticlimactic. Then Carrie Fisher comes back as Princess Leia. Um, and yeah, there's a problem with that, with how her character is used later in the film. Like there are she's really it's really cool to see her in the disguise, and she's one of the main people who helps save Han, and she risks her life, faking, dressing up as a bounty hunter, and even, threatens Jabba's life and so forth. And, to infiltrate the palace. And then she has a cool scene on the um what are those things called? They're called on the speeder bike. She has a cool chase of the speeder bike, and She holds her own with a pistol, with a blaster later in the film in the battle for Endor, and but then there's other elements of her character that just is just really that's the best they could do for Leia. I mean, I mean, getting her hair done by teddy bears, and it was just yeah, it was definitely one of those moments where it seems like George is like, Leia needs to be more feminine. She needs to be more, like a princess, and she needs, so the little girls in the audience can look up to her more. And like the little girls and little girls already looked up to her anyway before when she had a hard edge to her, when she was tough, when she wasn't soft and wimpy. Like this is like half and half. Like she's a strong character in the beginning. Then she gets put in the slave Leia outfit, which I have to admit, she looks fine. She looks fine as hell in it, but still, it's kind of a backwards turn for the character. And then she goes to kick some ass a little bit in the speeder bike, chase, and then shoots a pistol a few times. But still, they're bringing out this more princess aspect of her character, and really didn't give Carrie Fisher that much to do with the character in this film. And the new revelation that George came up with, the twist he came up with, I'm not a fan of at all. Billy Dee Williams comes back as Lando. He even gets to fly the Millennium Falcon in a very exciting, fun, it's like a trench run, but it's a run inside the Death Star. It's I love it. The effects in that sequence are fantastic. It's a really awesome looking sequence. Definitely a crowd pleaser. Anthony Daniels, of course, comes back as C-3PO. Peter Mayhew comes back as Chewbacca. Sebastian Shaw plays Anakin Skywalker. So, you see that's Vader after he takes his helmet off. And I thought he did a great job, Sebastian Shaw. And he should not have been replaced by Hayden Christensen on this DVD! It's stupid! Ian McDiarmid plays the Emperor and chews all the scenery and is awesome. I love every scene with the Emperor because Ian McDiarmid is just having so much fun with the role. You can't help but enjoy it. Frank Oz comes back as Yoda. David Prowse comes back as Darth Vader. James Earl Jones comes back as the voice of Darth Vader. Alec Guinness comes back in a little bit, brief role as Obi-Wan. And speaking of Obi-Wan Kenobi, there's like a weird, like original just story choice by George from the original screenplay. He was like, yeah, like Obi-Wan's gonna come to life. I'm like, what? That's stupid. Obi-Wan Kenobi's he's gonna stop being a Force ghost and he's gonna manifest himself in reality again. I'm like, that's dumb. I'm glad they didn't do that because that's pretty dumb. And of course, Kenny Baker also comes back as R2-D2. Dennis Lawson comes back as Wedge, and Kenneth Cawley and Jeremy Bulloch reprise the roles as Admiral Piet and Boba Fett. And you also have Warwick Davis in his acting debut as Wicket. And that only happened because Kenny Baker was originally going to play Wicket, but he was replaced by Davis after falling ill with food poisoning on the morning of the shoot. And Davis had no previous acting experience and was cast only after his grandmother had discovered an open call for dwarves for the new Star Wars film. So as much as I'm not a fan at all, really, of the Ewoks. I'm not a big Ewoks guy. But I'm glad that they were released in this film. I mean, because without Warwick Davis playing Wicket, he probably would never go on to play Willow. And that's one of my all-time favorite films, and I think Warwick Davis is great in that. So I have to give the Ewoks that. I mean, Warwick playing Wicket and Ewok is what led to him playing Willow Ufgood. So, I mean, I gotta give respect where respect is due there. Yeah, so with with the other movies, Lucas ended up personally financing Return of the Jedi. And he was hoping it would be a cheaper film. It wouldn't be as expensive, wouldn't go over budget like Empire did. And so what he did was he once again, he did the effects with ILM, which saved money because, I mean, ILM saved the production approximately $18 million working with ILM, which is owned by Lucas. And so they worked on a budget of $32.5 million, and Lucas did not want to go over budget. And I don't think he did. So he didn't go over budget this time. And originally, in the original version of the screenplay, Yoda was not even meant to appear in the movie. Which I'm like, wow, really? But Richard Maraquand, he's the one that felt strongly that the film and Luke should return to Dagobah because it was essential to resolve the dilemma raised by the previous films. And this inclusion led Lucas to insert a scene in which Yoda confirms that Darth Vader is Luke's father, because after a discussion with a children's psychologist, he did not want younger moviegoers to dismiss Vader's claim as a lie. And like was mentioned earlier, many of the original ideas from the original script were left out or changed. For instance, the Ewoks were going to be Wookiees. And I would have bought that more. I would have bought Wookiees defeating the Empire in a battle in the forest more than teddy bears with sticks and stones. It made the Empire look pathetic. It made the Empire look so weak after Empire made them look so strong. And it was a huge shift in tone. Every scene with the Ewoks was like goofy and silly and shit. And then you cut to scenes of the Emperor and Vader and Luke. It just was not a total shift in tone that was just jarring. It felt like it was two different movies. It was a movie for kids with the Ewoks and silly shit and then and slapstick humor and jokes. And then the Emperor, trying to manipulate Luke Skywalker, and then Luke and Vader fighting. I mean, it was just, what? It's just not the right type of tone. None of the other films had such a drastic shift in tone in the film. That never happened. Because the first movie was fun, tongue-in-cheek, enjoyable for kids and adults. It didn't seem like it was at all trying to pander to a certain audience. Empire was a little bit more serious, but it also had fun. So it was a great blend of the two, where it was a little bit serious, a little bit more dark, but then it also had, a sense of fun about it. Return of the Jedi, on the other hand, has a little bit of a darker tone at times, but then also has a really light tone. So it just doesn't really mesh very well. It doesn't blend. It's not a good mix. Tone shifts in tone really bug me because they're very obvious. They really hurt a film, at least for me personally, and Jedi is definitely one of those movies. So anyway, the film was, of course, cast. It was also, shot in Elstree Studios again, where they occupied all nine stages. Excuse me, I can't fucking say words right now for some reason. And they also did some shots in the Yuma Desert for 2 weeks of Tatooine exteriors. And when they were shooting the Rancor scene, Lucas originally had this concept. He's like, I want the Rancor to be like a guy in a suit, like the Godzilla movies. So they tried to do that, but it wasn't very effective. So they had to end up going with Phil Tippett's excellent stop motion work, which I'm really glad the man in a suit thing didn't work, because Phil Tippett's stop motion work for the Rancor is fantastic. And then when they were supposed to shoot in Endor, they shot in the Redwood Forest in Northern California for 2 weeks. So, yeah, so I thought that was a pretty cool location, and it was a perfect location. It was great. It was a great location. And after shooting was finished, the film entered post-production. And that's when some problems happened, because ILM was now given like the biggest job they had ever gotten before in terms of effects. And it stretched the company to its operational limits. While the R&D work and experience gained from the previous two films of the trilogy allowed for increased efficiency, this was offset by the desire to have the closing film raise the bar set by each of these films. And it really does. I mean, The visual effects in this, the model work, the visuals, the matte paintings, the backgrounds, it is just an absolute masterpiece. There's certain shots in this film, like for example, just that are just gorgeous. And it's a masterwork of visual and optical and practical effects. And they were kind of tight. It was not really tight for the budget wise, but they were tight in time. Compounding factor was the intention of several departments of ILM to either take on other film work or decrease the staff during slow cycles. But instead, as soon as production began, the entire company found it necessary to remain running 20 hours a day on six-day weeks in order to meet their goals. By April 1st, 1983, of about 900 special effects shots, all VistaVision optical effects remained in-house, since ILM was the only company capable of using the format, while about 400 4-perf opticals were subcontracted to outside effects houses. Progress on the opticals was severely slowed down for a time due to ILM rejecting about 100,000 feet of film when the film preparations failed image registration and steadiness tests. I mean, it's insane. They work 20 hours a day on 6-day weeks in order to finish these goals, in order to finish 900 special effects shots. I gotta give the cast and crew at ILM an absolute round of applause for that effort. And it really did show. I mean, they put a lot into it, and it definitely did show, and it looked fantastic, and the work was definitely worth it, and it was definitely appreciated. Now we get into just like basically, I'm going to talk about the plot a little bit, do a plot synopsis, and then I'm going to talk about some things about specific things about the film. While I'll go through the plot synopsis that I liked, and then things that I didn't like, and then, of course, give you guys the final rating, so like I always do. Anyway, the basic gist of the plot is this. Luke Skywalker initiates a plan in the beginning of the film to rescue Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt, with the help of Princess Leia, Lando Calrissian, Chewbacca, C-3PO, and R2-D2. He does this by getting all of his friends to infiltrate Jabba's palace on Tatooine. Leia infiltrates it, disguised as a bounty hunter with Chewbacca as a prisoner. Lando is already there, disguised as a guard. Leia then releases Han from his carbonite prison, but then she is captured and enslaved. Before I go any further, I gotta say the makeup effects on Jabba the Hutt are great. They're really fantastic. They still look fantastic. They still look really, really good to this day. They're excellent. It looks very photorealistic, especially the eyes and the puppetry and all the work that they did for the mechanical effects and the makeup effects of Jabba the Hutt is really, really good. You could tell how much makeup special effects had improved by the time this film rolled around. So she gets captured and enslaved and put in a very sexy bikini. Then Luke arrives soon afterward, but after a tense standoff, he is captured. He is then sentenced to fight the Rancor, and he defeats the Rancor in a fun sequence. And then Jabba sentences him and Han to death by feeding them into the pit monster Sarlacc, where they'll be digested for 1,000 years slowly. So then they're taken to the Great Pit of Cocoon, the Sarlacc's nesting ground, and there are some fun lines of dialogue, remember, between Han and Luke, where Han is having problems with his vision because he's dealing with this sickness he's getting after being released out of hibernation for so long, hibernation sickness. And they're on the skiff flying across the deserts of Tatooine, and Han's talking to Luke, and he's like, I think my eyes are getting better. Instead of a big dark blur, I see a big bright blur. And Luke's like, there's nothing to see. I used to live here, And Han's like, you're going to die here, Convenient. That was a good bit of, a little bit of humor that I definitely did enjoy. For one, I also thought Harrison did a fine job. Mark did a fantastic job. This is, I think, Mark's best performance out of the entire trilogy, and one of his best performance acting-wise, period. He did a great job playing Luke as this. Now he's grown up. Now he's no longer whiny. He's no longer raw. Now he's a calm, cool, collected Jedi and a badass, and I really like that. I think Mark did a great job portraying that character and those elements of that character. Harrison Ford, he gets a lot of criticism by people saying that he's not Han Solo, he's like somebody else, and it's a bad performance, and he's just phoning it in. But I didn't see it that way. I really didn't. I think he matured a little bit, softened the edges a little bit, but it's still the same Han that I know and love. I didn't really see him being anyone. I didn't see what other people have seen, where Harrison is phoning it in, delivering a bad performance, and not really being Han Solo. I didn't see that. So anyway, so they're gonna be sentenced to death, and Luke's like, "This is your last chance, you know, let me go, otherwise I'm gonna destroy you." And of course, Jabba's like, "Ha ha ha, yeah, right, whatever." And then Luke frees himself with R2-D2's help because he smuggled in his lightsaber that he built in R2-D2, and R2-D2 launches it at Luke. He grabs it, does the backflip, grabs the lightsaber, battles Jabba's guards in a really cool scene. And during the chaos, Boba Fett shows up, attempts to attack Luke, and fails, shoots a laser at him. Luke bounces off the laser blast with his lightsaber like it's nothing. Tries to wrap Luke up in like some rope thing. Luke cuts out of it in like less than a few seconds. It doesn't even faze Luke. And then Han Solo kills Boba Fett, and it's in the most ridiculous comedic way imaginable. I don't know whose idea was this. Was it Caston's? Was it George's? Let's take a character who looks like a badass and had a presence in Empire Strikes Back. Let's bring him back for Return of the Jedi. But then let's kill him off in the most ridiculous and corny fashion imaginable. That completely destroys the character, completely destroys his integrity, completely destroys anything badass about him. Where Han Solo is fucking blind, and then he hears, "Boba Fett, where?" And then he just smacks Boba Fett with like a metal. It's like a spear or stick or something, and he hits him with it, a metal pole. He hits fucking Boba with a metal pole, hits his jetpack, and Boba Fett goes, "Ah!" into a fucking Sarlacc pit. That's your badass. And no, man, it's so pathetic. The Rocketeer kicked more ass than Boba Fett does in any of these movies. That's why I personally feel, and I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I do like Boba Fett, but I think he's unbelievably overrated as a character. Oh, you have to read the comics, the expanded universe, and the video games. Those don't count. You know why? Because the only thing that really, to me, is actually real, that actually, okay, is the films. And on film, Boba Fett didn't do that much, except look cool, say some few cool lines, and then die like a bitch in Return of the Jedi. That's what happened. Han's like, "Boba Fett, where?" Clang. Ah! Into the fucking Sarlacc pit. I mean, come on. I'm sorry, that's not badass. That's not badass. And if you need comics and video games to show me how much of a badass he is, I'm sorry. That's like taking a shitty Marvel Comics character like Angar the Screamer and showing me like a what if comic. What if he was awesome and didn't suck? And I'm like, so? That doesn't count. That's a what if comic. He still sucks. That's the same thing with Boba Fett. He still died like a bitch in the Sarlacc pit, screaming like one all the way down. I mean, come on. I like Boba Fett, but let's stop with the most badass character in the Star Wars universe and the most badass bounty hunter in the galaxy. He fucking He gets his ass killed by a blind Han Solo. But that's just my little mini rant there. I just had to throw that out there. I mean, Boba Fett looks cool, and I just wish he had more to do in the films that he was in, because it wasn't much. But watch the new Boba Fett movies, getting standalone movies, supposed to come out what, like 2020? It'll ignore, it'll do the best it can to try to make Boba Fett a badass, and we'll see. Maybe that'll make up for it. Maybe that'll actually make me forget about him dying like a bitch. Oh wait, no, I probably won't forget about that. Or they'll do it where they'll just do it like in the movie. He'll survive the Sarlacc pit, even though no one really has before. But whatever. So anyway, Boba Fett dies like a bitch because he gets knocked into the Sarlacc pit by Han Solo. Leia then strangles Jabba. Luke destroys Jabba's sail barge as the group escapes. And that's a very fun sequence. I love the skiff action sequence. It's a great sequence. I love seeing Luke with the lightsaber fighting all these, Jabba's guards. And then Leia strangling Jabba to death. And then the big ass explosion in the sail barge. I love it. It's great. It's a really fun, exciting sequence. And then while the others rendezvous with the Rebel Alliance, Luke returns to Dagobah where he finds that Yoda is dying. Before he dies, Yoda confirms that Darth Vader, once known as Anakin Skywalker, is Luke's father, and there is another Skywalker. And that's always a heart-wrencher when Yoda dies. I remember getting teary-eyed, misty-eyed about that when I was a kid. And I definitely did get a little bit misty-eyed seeing it now. Frank Oz and the puppeteers for Yoda did such an amazing job making you feel for a puppet. Really, you're crying for the loss of a puppet. It's a puppet, but they did such a great job that you're emotionally connected to it as you would be to any other real person. Then the ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi confirms that the other Skywalker is Luke's twin sister Leia, after Luke realizes the truth, which is a plot point I don't like. It's completely unnecessary. It just screams of George Lucas, I need another twist, just like I had for Empire, where, Vader is Luke's father. Well, Leia is Luke's sister. So great, you turned all the sequences from the first two films where Leia is kissing Luke and hugging Luke and they have the hots for each other into fucking incest. Thanks a lot, George. That's wonderful. That's completely unnecessary. That's what that is. Nobody wanted to see those sequences become incest. Guess what it is? Leia has a long kiss with Luke before in Empire. She's more interested in Luke than she is in Han in Star Wars. You're led to believe that they're more of a couple than Han and Leia are. And she's hugging his freaking leg on the poster for Star Wars. And now they're brother and sister? Gah! Why, George? Why? She didn't need to be a Skywalker. I like the fact that she created her own name and her own legacy that wasn't a Skywalker legacy. In the Marvel comics, she was a badass. She carved a name for herself in a world full of men and made a name that was well known throughout the galaxy. That was her own, not Skywalker. So I don't really like that storyline. I never cared for it, and I still don't like it. It's just completely unnecessary. But she could have that. So there is another. That another could also be interpreted as Anakin. I know Vader. I know Obi-Wan and Yoda. I don't think there's any hope for Vader or Anakin. But that other Jedi could be Anakin, or it could be some other Jedi that you just don't even tell us because you can leave it a mystery for future sequels. Hell, that could have been Rey. But no, it's Leia, and then they don't do anything with her in future installments in terms of the Force. So it's just completely unnecessary. There's no reason for that. People said, "What? How is Luke gonna contact Leia at the end of Empire? He has Force powers. You can communicate with people who don't have the Force that way. I don't think you have to have the Force to be able to communicate with somebody to communicate in their mind. I don't think you have to have the Force to be able to do that. How the hell does any Jedi make people actually do what the Jedi tells them to do with a Jedi mind trick? It's the same sort of thing. She didn't need to have Jedi powers to be able to hear Luke's cries for help in Empire. It's just completely unnecessary. All it is a twist. It's a twist that George had to throw in there that was just to try to give this film its own shocking revelation like Empire did, and it just isn't anywhere near as memorable or anywhere near as successful. It just comes across as desperate and just really ruins their relationship in a lot of ways. It makes it just, it makes it awkward. It makes it very awkward. Extremely awkward. Would have been better if they were just friends, not brother and sister. So then Obi-Wan tells Luke that he must fight Vader again to defeat the Empire. And then, of course, he also tells him, keep your emotions in check, especially your hate, because they would lead you to serve the Emperor. The Rebel Alliance then learns that the Emperor has been constructing a new Death Star, which I'm like, okay, another Death Star. But I was okay with it in this because, okay, they're rebuilding another. It makes sense that they would try it again, at least one more time. And this is under the supervision of the Emperor himself. As the station is protected by energy shield, Han leads a strike team to destroy the shield generator on the forest moon of Endor. Doing so would allow a squadron of starfighters to destroy the Death Star. The strike team, accompanied by Luke and Leia, travels to Endor in a stolen Imperial shuttle. On Endor, Luke and his companions encounter a tribe of Ewoks. And, of course, before actually that happens, there's a really fun speeder bike chase, which is one of my favorite action sequences in the film. It's thrilling. It really gets your adrenaline going. It's great. I really love that sequence. Really well shot, too. And so then they meet the Ewoks. They get captured by the Ewoks because Chewie is being stupid and grabs a piece of meat, and they get trapped in a net. R2 gets them out, but then they get saved. They get captured by the Ewoks, and I don't really like the Ewoks. Don't care for the Ewoks. They think C-3PO is a god, and all this kind of stuff. And the film slows down to an absolute crawl at this moment, to the point where you just have scenes of C-3PO telling the Ewoks what happened in Empire. Then you have a battle on Endor, where Han and Leia and the Ewoks and Chewbacca and C-3PO and R2-D2 are trying to get into the compound to shut down the shield generator, so so the Rebel fleet can attack the Death Star and blow it up for the second and hopefully final time. And then it's intercut with a confrontation between Luke, Vader, and the Emperor. And this is just, like I said, it's just a weird, jarring shifts in tone. And I do have some fun with some of the Ewok stuff, some of the creativity they use to stop the Empire, but at the same time, it just really makes the Stormtroopers and the Empire's forces look weaker than ever. Because they're getting their asses kicked by teddy bears. Teddy bears! Might as well be getting their asses kicked by gummy bears, for fuck's sake. It's just as pathetic. But Han ends up blowing up the shield generator, and I actually like how he finds a way to get into the control room, and I love how he does it. Like he finds a way to hotwire everything. He gets in there. Basically, what he does, he gets C-3PO to basically tell a little lie that ends up getting the crew to run outside. And then I love how they're looking around, and then Han's like, just shrugs his shoulders, and then then they go in and take care of business. And Han blows up the shield generator. Of course, before the rebels tried to attack the Death Star at first, but then they realized that the shields are still up, and it's a trap. And then to wait for Han to blow up the shield generator, Luke confronts the Emperor, says, "You're not gonna turn me like you did my father." And the Emperor's like, "Strike me down, strike me down, and your conversion to the dark side will be complete." And then I always love this sequence by the Emperor. It's just, I love his. It's some people could consider it overacting, but you can tell that McDiarmid is having so much fun with this role. So I love this where the moment where he's talking to Luke and Luke's watching the battle. The rebel forces getting attacked by the Empire because it was a trap that was set up by the Emperor. And even the Emperor's explaining it to Luke. Is like, everything that has transpired has done so according to my design. Your friends up there on the sanctuary moon are walking into a trap, as is your rebel fleet. It was I who allowed the Alliance to know the location of the shield generator. It is quite safe from your pitiful little band. An entire legion of my best troops awaits them. Oh, I'm afraid the deflector shield will be quite operational when your friends arrive. I just love that line delivery when he's like, "Oh, I'm afraid the deflector shield will be quite operational." I just love that. I had to mention that because I really do like that sequence. I really do like that performance. So Luke he ends up having enough of the Emperor's shit. Force grabs his lightsaber and goes fight Darth Vader. A really, really well done lightsaber battle. Probably the best one in the original trilogy. And Vader makes a remark about his sister and says that if you won't turn, then she will. And that pisses Luke off. But he's like, never! And then lets his anger get a hold of him. It kicks Vader's ass in a crowd pleasing moment, like cuts his hand off, but then he realizes that's exactly what Vader and the Emperor want. So he calms down and drops his lightsaber, and then he's not going to do it. He's not going to let it give into the hate. And the Emperor's had enough of that, starts shooting him with force lightning, and it looks like he's gonna die, and he's dying, and he's asking his father for help, and his father's looking around, and Vader has a turn in his character that I've always liked actually, where he actually fulfills his destiny that he was supposed to. When he was young, he was supposed to be the chosen one, and he was supposed to stop the Empire and bring peace throughout the galaxy. And he actually does succeed here. He sacrifices his own life to save his sons and the rest of the galaxy from the Empire, and lifts up the Emperor and throws his ass down the shaft. And then Vader is severely damaged. His life support systems are damaged, and he's going to die. It's a very emotional scene where he's talking to his son, and Luke's like, yeah, we gotta go get you. I'll save you. We'll get out of here. And this is while the Death Star's about ready to get blown up because Lando and the Rebel fleet and Wedge have come in, and this awesome scene of of them flying through the the exhaust ports and all of that, just flying through the inside of the Death Star. I love it. It's a great scene. The effects are fantastic, and they blow up the support. There's a big thing in the middle of the Death Star that keeps it together, so to speak. And they blow that up and then get the hell out of there. And then it's about to blow up. Everyone's evacuating, and then Luke's grabbing Vader, and he's telling Vader's telling him, take take off my helmet. I want to see you with my own eyes. I want to see my son with my own eyes. And Luke's like, but no, you'll die. And he's like, it's already done. That's already what's going. There's no stopping that. And it's such an emotional scene. I remember I can't stop that now. Nothing can stop that now. Just for once, let me look on you with my own eyes. Then you see Vader, and he's this sad old man. It's something that it's a total disconnect from what you think Vader would be, but he's a sad old man with these sad eyes, and he's more machine than man, and here he is, and he's dying, and he's saying, "Leave me here. Go, my son, leave me." And Luke's like, "No, you're coming with me. I'll not leave you here. I've got to save you." And Anakin's like, "You already have, Luke. You were right. You were right about me. Tell your sister you were right." And then Anakin dies. And then, Luke had, Mark Hamill does a good job with showing his emotions in this scene, and then says, "Father, I won't ever leave you." And then basically drags his corpse onto the escape shuttle. The film ends on Endor. It's a fun celebration with fireworks in the sky because the Death Star's exploded and blown up. The second Death Star, which is unfinished, which I like that choice. It wasn't even finished, but it was fully operational. And then you have that Yub Nub song, which is one of the few things about the Ewoks I actually do like. And I don't mind Wicket either. Because it's Warwick Davis. I can't hate Wicket. Um, and have the celebration, and then you see the Force Ghost of Obi-Wan and Anakin. Not Hayden Christensen's the stupid Sebastian Shaw and Yoda, and they're celebrating along with everybody else, and it's just it's a happy ending. It's a happy ending to the franchise until The Force Awakens, and then then it's kind of no longer so happy. But hey, at least I had 30 years of happiness. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But anyway, yeah, I really don't know what to say about Return of the Jedi. I know this review is a little bit longer than Empire, but I just had more to say about Return of the Jedi because there were some things that I didn't like, some problems I had with it. Um, there was some pacing issues, like after the scene on Dagobah. I mean, pretty actually, what happens is it gets really slow, and when they get captured by the Ewoks. And then I'm just like, the film really slows to a halt. But until that point, it was pretty fast paced and pretty exciting. Shifts in tone with the Ewoks doing silly shit, fighting the stormtroopers on Endor, and then Emperor Palpatine and Vader versus Luke. It's just not a really good contrast. It's a really strange contrast, and it doesn't work. Um, I thought for the most part, all the other performances were good. The direction was solid by Richard Maraquand, but the story, it was fine. I just the tone was the biggest thing. The tone really was it just didn't feel like the other two films. It just felt like it was dark and serious at times, and then super light and fluffy. It was just not really a good tone, and it really kind of left a bad taste in my mouth at times. It was just not a very good mix. And the Ewoks and all the cutesy shit that's thrown in the movie for kids, characters for kids like Salacious Crumb, which is annoying, and Boba Fett being basically turned into a bitch. I don't like that. And but yeah, other than that, and the whole storyline with Leia being Luke's sister, which was completely unnecessary. I don't care for that either. But other than that, I like Return of the Jedi. I really don't know what to say about the film, except also if I was going to rate it out of 5 stars, I'd give Return of the Jedi 4 out of 5. Tone issues in the final 30 minutes or so bother me. Some of the plot elements I don't care for at all. The really pandering to children approach, the merchandising overload with the Ewoks and stuff like that, I don't care for. So those things hold it back a little bit for me, but I still like the film. I still do. I love the Emperor, every scene with the Emperor. I love the visual effects. I love the way the film, certain shots in the film look. John Williams' score is great as always. Richard Maraquand did a good job directing the film. George Lucas did a good job directing whatever he did. Um, and there's some fun action sequences. The sequence on the skiff, some parts of the Battle of Endor, and the speeder bike chase, and the Vader versus Luke rematch was really a lot of fun to watch. So Anyway, yeah, I really was to say, and the destruction of the second Death Star. I love that. The rebel uh flight through the Death Star when they're like getting ready to blow it up. I think that's an excellent sequence. It's one of my favorite. It's actually like that scene a little bit more than the sequence in the first movie. I really do. I just love the way it's shot. How all these tiny all these TIE fighters and X-wings are all in this tiny closed in space, tight space, and they're fighting each other. And the Millennium Falcon is slamming on in this big this. It's a bigger ship in this small space, and it just that's for a very thrilling, exciting sequence. Um, and it's nice to see Lando, get to fly his ship again. But yeah, I don't know what else to say. Except I really do feel that Return of the Jedi, even though it's a step down from the first two for me, I do think it's a good film, and I do think it's the last truly good film um, in the franchise. Um, it's not great, but I do like it, and I do enjoy it. So anyway, I don't. Thanks for watching my review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it's a bit long, but there's some things I really wanted to make sure I touched upon in this particular review. Anyway, stay tuned for more. I can stay tuned for Ewoks. Yay! Caravan of Courage and Battle for Endor.